ॐ नमो नारायणाय ॐ नमो नारायणाय
Asmat Guru Bhyo Namaha, Asmat Parama Guru Bhyo Namaha, Asmat Sarva Guru Bhyo Namaha. So we're continuing on with Thomas again as Introduction to Sanskrit. And this is going to be lesson 13. So let's have a look at lesson 13. Lesson 13. So here's a summary of what we're going to be talking about today. As far as the alphabet is concerned, he's going to talk to us a little bit about Sandhi rules for combining vowels. We already talked about this before in a previous lesson, so you can look at that. But we're going to get some more information about that. Then the grammar is going to be feminine nouns in long I, ending in long I. Last time we had feminine nouns, we introduced feminine nouns for the first time with the feminine nouns ending in long A. So then relative, correlative clauses, and then we're going to have some vocabulary, which will also give us some more vocabulary of feminine nouns in long I. Also, relative and correlative adverbs. An adverb is an adjective describes a noun, helps to describe a noun or a name, right? And an adverb helps us to describe the verb, okay? That's a very simple understanding of what an adverb is. Okay, so let's go ahead. So the following chart shows the changes that vowels often undergo, right? So these changes are called guna and vriddhi, right? So if we look over in the left-hand column here, we have these vowels. So we have a, I, u, ri, and ri. So the next column, we can see written down the bottom here. It could be written on the top even. Then from a short A, the guna of a short A becomes a. Well, we'll see the use of guna and vriddhi later on, but anyway, just get this idea that and from the long A becomes also long A. From the shorter long A becomes the letter E, which is pronounced A. The short U and the long U become O. The short R becomes R, and the short R becomes Al. Here we have, they're the guna. That's the guna column. Now, the vriddhi column, the short A becomes long A. So becomes A. The long A remains long A, A. The E becomes I. The O becomes ow. The R, AR, becomes R with a long A before the R. And the short A, L, al, it becomes al. So those are the vriddhi changes. Now, if you go even further, these vowels correspond to some of these vowels correspond to the following semivowels. So the I, A, I, ya, right? U, o, ow, v, ri, r, r, ra, and the ri, al, la. So ya, v, ra, and la are the semivowels. And why do we call them semivowels? Because they're made from vowels. They come from vowels. Okay, so this is important to understand when we have certain types of sandhi. All right, so let's see some application now. This important chart will help you understand how vowels combine in both internal and external sandhi. Just to recap, what's internal sandhi? Sandhi is the joining of two words or two parts of a word, right? When two letters join together, the ending letter of one section and the beginning letter of another section of a word, or the ending letter of one word and the beginning letter of another word. That is sandhi. How it comes together, how it's combined, right? And what changes occur. So that's sandhi. So there's internal sandhi within a word, different parts of the word, and there's external sandhi between one word and another word. So this is how it works. Later on, it will help you to understand how roots are strengthened by guna and vriddhi. So roots, remember the root is when we talk about roots, we're talking about verbal stems. When we talk about roots. Well, when we just talk about stems, usually we're talking about noun stems of nouns or adjectives, right? So when we see roots change to become verbal stems, and those verbal stems then have the regular endings added to them. And we only know 9 endings for the present tense so far. And we also have just learned a gerund in the previous lesson, which is a type of verbal indeclinable noun, which tells us the meaning having done something, right? Sort of like it's a type of participle, right? So we know those endings. We know about 10 verbal endings, right? So, but the actual root of the verb has to be changed first before putting those endings on. So those roots sometimes get strengthened by either making the ending vowel of that root into guna or into vriddhi. Sometimes. Okay, so we'll see that. So to form verbs and nominals and nouns. Okay, so for example, okay, so let's give some examples. Because this is all theoretical until we see the examples. So we have the root vid, to know, right? And by guna, we get the I, the short I in vid becomes e, right? Because up here, let's have a look again. So short I and long I become e by guna, right? So down here we have that vid turning to ved. We add an a to it, it becomes veda. So we get veda from the root vid. And in fact, all Sanskrit words, even the nouns, come from these verbal roots. So there are about 2,200 verbal roots in Sanskrit. And there's a book by Panini called Dhatu Pat, which means the lesson on verbal roots. And he actually says, this is the verbal root. And if you look at this verbal root, this is the basic meaning of this verbal root. So when you look up the meaning of a word in a dictionary, it's trying to give you the meaning from the verbal root. Now, a word in Sanskrit may come to mean something different than what its original verbal root means. That's another thing. But we can always trace back the meaning of any word to its verbal root. So here we have vid becomes veda, guna, and then we have vaidya or vaidika. We can say vaidika, right? Vaidika as it means something according to the Veda, right? So vaidya is an example of how it's changed. The e becomes a in Veda, and the vid becomes ved, then it becomes vaid, right? Okay, all right. So here's another example. Div, right? Div, the I becomes e, deva, right? Or daivika, right? These words are all related in their meaning, okay? But they represent the vowel in the root has changed, has become strengthened by a long a. It's become strengthened, and the e becomes a, and then I. In yuj, right, becomes yoga. The u becomes o, and then ow, yoga, yogika. For dri becomes dharma. The dri becomes r, and then dharmika with a long a, ar. Okay, so guna and vriddhi. So this is interesting. So memorize the above chart and then memorize the Sandhi rules for combining the vowels as follows. Okay, so we should know this, right? We should know how these initial vowels become strengthened either by guna or vriddhi, right? And will be there's no real equivalent in English. We just say the vowels are being strengthened in English, but they're being strengthened by a system called guna and vriddhi, which is a Sanskrit system. So we just remember that. So now we have here's some idea of similar vowels here, right? So memorize the following rules. Now he's already given us the chart. So if we just look at the chart for the beginning, we've got that chart which we look on. I don't know what lesson it's on, but he gives us a chart for a vowel at the end of a part of a word, or at the end of a word and the beginning of the next part, or the beginning of a next word, and how it combines, so that we can just look at the chart if we want to know the answer. But here is a more explanation about it, right? So here we have the similar vowels. So we have a short or long, the letter A shorter long, the letter A shorter long added to the letter A shorter long, right, becomes a long A, right? So if we look at the chart up here, that's true, right? So A shorter long plus A shorter long becomes long A, right? Okay. So we look down here. Here's an example. Rama Ashvaha becomes short A at the end of Rama, short A at the beginning of Ashvaha becomes Ramashvaha, Ramashvaha, right? It coalesces to being a long A. All right, so let's see another one. Short I, long or short I plus long or short I becomes long I. This is similar vowel. So gachati iti, gachati iti. Short or long U plus short or long U becomes long U. Guru upa, guru upa, guru upa, guru upa. Okay. Short re plus short re becomes long re. So pitri rishi. So pitri rishi becomes pitrishi, pitrishi. Right. Okay. So that's 4 similar vowels coming together. That's easy. So what about if they're dissimilar vowels, right? The one vowel at the end and the vowel at the beginning is not the same. It's not just a matter of being long or short. It's just a completely different vowel. So if we have I, short or long, the letter I, right? Let's say short or long, right? Plus another vowel, plus some other vowel, any other vowel, right? Then that I changes to the semi-vowel ya, right? Y, not ya, but just Y, right? Vowel means here any vowel, any short or long vowel. So here's an example. Gachati, gachati ends in a short I. The next word, ashvam, right, begins with a short A. So I, short A followed by short A. What happens is the short I turns into a semi-vowel Y. So it's going to be gachatyashvam, gachatyashvam. Yeah. You, let's see, short or long U followed by any vowel. You can guess it's going to become another semi-vowel. This time, the U is going to become V, right? So Guru Ashva, Guru Ashvam. So Guru Ashvam becomes Gurvashvam, Gurvashvam. The last U, short U on the end of Guru is going to turn into a V, right? Now, if it's Ri, short Ri or long Ri plus a vowel, right? We have Pitri, Atra. Pitri Atra is going to be Pitratra, right? The re actually turned into R. It turned into an R, the letter R, which is a semivowel. Okay. So now if we have another rule, we have A, the letter E, right? Plus short A, right? Becomes, it stays the same as an A, and the short A is deleted or is dropped, right? And we show that by an avagraha symbol, which is over here in the Devanagari, right? Or in Roman transliteration, we show it by an apostrophe to show that a short A has been dropped. So here's an example: grame plus atra, grame plus atra. So we have A plus a. Right? The short A is going to drop out. So it's going to be grametra with an avagraha symbol. Yeah. Or an apostrophe in the Roman. So then we have A followed by another vowel apart from short A. Any other vowel apart from short A means long A or any other vowel coming in the beginning of a word and when the first word ends in an E. Right, so grame iti is an example, right? There are many other examples we can use. Grame iti, so long E followed by I, right? Grame iti, right, is going to become an A. The E is going to, at the end of grame is going to become a short A. We're going to leave them separated, not like up here where we join them with a avagraha. We're going to leave a space here in the Devanagari, and we're going to have then iti. Right, so that the nothing happens to the short I in the second word, beginning of the second word, but the E at the end of grame is turned into a short A. So grame iti becomes Grama iti. Grama iti. Okay. And once you do that, no more, you don't do it again and again and again until you get something put together. You have to leave it that way. So you apply one Sandhi rule and that's it. And then that's it, finished. Right. Okay. So now we have AI, I plus any vowel, right? Plus any vowel. So if there's any vowel coming after I in the next word, so it becomes long A plus that vowel, right? So here is an example. We have tasmai plus atra, right? Tasmai plus atra. Tasmai plus atra becomes tasma atra. Again, we leave we're not going to then do a secondary Sandhi and put these long A with the short A and make it into another long A. That would be confusing. Then we wouldn't know how to split it. We have to keep the Devanagari separate at this point, and we also keep the Roman separate. Okay, so next, an O seldom occurs in the final position before Sandhi is applied, right? So normally we understand if we get a visarga, a short A visarga, it turns into an O before a soft letter like G or B or whatever it is, right? So, but that's not the original ending. If we look back at our nominals and our verbal endings, we don't know an ending that is originally ending in a letter O. So an O seldom occurs in a final position before Sandhi is applied. That's just, he's just saying that. And we know that already because we haven't learned any endings that end in O, right? Only after Sandhi has been applied, the short A visarga may turn into an O. So anyway, here we have, okay, so he's dealt with, he's dealt with these things here. We've dealt with short and long I, short and long A, short and long I, short and long U, short re. He's dealt with, he didn't deal with re because it's very, very uncommon. Then he dealt with I, U, re, right? A, I, right? Instead of dealing with O, right? He dealt with I, and then he didn't deal with O because it doesn't happen very often, okay? Or seldom occurs, he said, so don't worry about it. Right, now he's going to deal with ow. So if we give ow plus any vowel, right, becomes av. Becomes av. We can look at the guna and vriddhi chart and we can see ow becomes av. Like that. It becomes a V anyway. So long A and a V. So gajao is the example. Gajao, we know that's an ending. So we have words that end in an ow. And et. So gajao et becomes gajav et. Gajav et. In that case, the Devanagari is all put together like that. Right. Okay. So now the only reason to keep Devanagari split up, right, is that to show where if we put it together, it would not be understood what the Sandhi, how the Sandhi is to be broken, right? So in this case, we can understand how it's broken because we see that V there, right? So final A, final short A, followed by dissimilar vowels, right? So if we have long or short A plus long or short I becomes E. So tatra iti, right? Tatra iti becomes tatreti, advai idvai A is the rule in, I think, Harinama Mridavakranam. Anyway, there's some rules like that. Anyway, so now we have short A long U, shorter long A plus shorter long U. Here's the example is kata Upanishad, kato Panishad. So A and U coalesce to become O. So A and I become E, A and U become O, right? You can see where we get the gunas and the vriddhis from, right? So now shorter long A plus R plus Ri, right, become R. Here's the example, Satya with a short A at the end. Next word, Ritam, becomes Satyartam, right? We can split it in the Roman, but we can't split it in the Devanagari. It's like that. But we can see where it's coming from, R. Okay. Now, Short or long A plus E or I becomes I. So here's an example. Tatra eva becomes tatraiva. Short or long A plus O or ow becomes ow. Atra plus okaha, atraukaha. So this is also, if we look at the guna and vritti charts, we'll see how O becomes ow, A becomes I, like that from guna to vritti, right? If we remember our guna and vritti charts like that. Okay, so now don't worry too much about this because we have the charts, we have the Sunday grids. If we just follow the Sunday grids and we look it up on the Sunday grids, we understand these are just the rules behind the Sunday grids. So he's already taught us all this before by just teaching us to look at the grids, right? It's just more explanation that he's giving us because he wants us to understand the theory behind the grids and why euphonically, why phonetically these things occur, why they occur, how the vowels become lengthened or strengthened, right, by the system of guna and vritti, and then ultimately become semivowels. There's another system where the semivowels go back and become the vowels. That's called samprasaranam. That's a different thing. So, but now we just learned how to strengthen the vowels, and ultimately they can also become semivowels in different circumstances. These are the rules. We don't have to remember them. We just have to know that they're there. And if we have a trouble, we look at the chart, the Sunday chart, and we find the answer on the Sunday chart. And ultimately, we will understand these rules and how they work. That's fine. Okay, so now, number 9 here, he says some vowels are called pragrihya. There's a special type of vowel called pragrihya, right? Are not subject to Sunday. They are. Okay, so now he's taught you all these rules about Sunday. He wants to tell you what the exceptions are to these rules, because for every rule, there's some sort of exception. So here are the exceptions. A, the letters long I, long U, or E, A, right? Pronounce A, when they serve as dual endings, dual case endings, or dual case endings, or even dual endings, usually dual case endings, right? And for nouns, I don't know if we have, maybe we have some dual endings for verbs, I don't know. Anyway, so dual case endings for nouns. So when it's in the dual, remember we have 3 numbers in Sanskrit: singular, dual, and plural, right? Plurals for 3 or more, singulars for only one of a thing. When we have 2 of a thing or a pair of things, right, we put that in the dual. So when you have a dual case ending, either long I, long U, or E, for example, ballet, right? Ballet means 2, but we have bala. Remember, we have bala, which means a boy, and bala, feminine A ending noun, right, which we just learned, right, means a girl. So a girl is bala, but 2 girls is ballet, bala, ballet, balaha. That's how we decline it. So ballet agatitaha, right? The 2 girls come, right? So when this ballet is a dual case ending, see, we have this long A in agatitaha, right? The A and the long agat and the E at the end of ballet and the long A at the beginning of agatitaha, they should do some Sunday, but they don't do Sunday because it's an exception, because ballet is dual. It's a dual case ending, and that's an exception, right? So we have a rule up there to tell us, and we even have a Sunday grid to tell us, right, that when we put E at the end of a word, long A at the beginning of the word, we have to change it. But the exception to that rule, and where the Sunday grid will not help us, is remembering the exceptions. So it's more important to remember the exceptions here than it is to remember the rules of Sunday, because the rules of Sunday are all covered by the Sunday grids, the Sunday charts, but the exceptions will not be covered, right? So therefore we have to remember this is more important, this part, pragriha. So when there's dual case endings of long I, long U, or E, do not do Sunday. Do not do the Sunday with the next word, right? Okay. Secondly, right, the final vowel of an interjection. What's an interjection? Interjection means something somebody spoke, right? Hey, aho, bo, you know, these are all interjections. hello, hey, somebody's yelling out aloha or ahoy, these are all in English. We say things like that. Something's spoken out loud. Hey there, So that's what an interjection is. Usually in the vocative, usually an interjection is vocative because it's spoken, right? For example, aho ashva, when somebody's addressing his horse and saying, oh horse, or hey horse, hello horse, it needs no sandhi. So aho or bo or hey, right? Like that in Sanskrit. These are all ways of saying oh, like that. Then the next word, if it begins with a vowel, there's no vowel sandhi between this o. So no sandhi. So what are the two exceptions? The two exceptions are when we get dual case endings and when we get interjections in the vocative, like aho, bo, or hey. Yeah. Okay. So now let's look at some other grammar. That's everything about sandhi, like that. Now, don't worry about it, except for the exceptions that came at the end of that section, right? We already know how to put those vowels together because we have a chart. The only thing that we learn new really is the exceptions, these two things. So that's the most important thing that we have to look at. We have to remember that. Okay, so now moving on, the next section is about long I ending stems, long I ending nouns, feminine long I ending nouns. We haven't even got I ending nouns for masculine or neuter, but we're going to have feminine long I ending nouns. Why? Because they're more important probably than anyway. So we have the paradigm here is of nadi. Nadi means river. Nadi, right? So let's just run through it. Here it is. Here's the declension. So nadi, feminine, a river. Nadi, nadyao, nadyaha. Nadim, nadyao, nadihi. Nadya, nadibyam, nadibihi. Nadyai, nadibyam, nadibyaha. Nadyaha, nadibyam, nadibyaha. Nadyaha, nadyoho, nadinam. Nadyam, nadyoho, nadishu. Nadi, nadyo, nadyao, nadyaha. Okay, so that's it. So we just have to print it out. We have to decide on a nice I ending feminine noun, and to learn the paradigm. Now, what are correlative or relative or correlative clauses? Now we will learn about relative and correlative clauses. In English, the sentence, I see where the king lives, contains two separate clauses, right? So what are clauses? Clauses are parts of sentences. A lot of times in English, we put a comma after a clause to set it off, to set it aside. It's a major piece of a sentence, right? And it may relate to other parts of the sentence in certain ways, right? So we're going to learn about that. So we say, I see where the king lives, contains two clauses, right? The first one is, I see. I see will stand by itself as it can stand by itself as a sentence. I see. Yeah, it has a verb, it has a subject, I, right? In Sanskrit, it could be just one pashyami, right? I see. It could be just one word, right? That, or it could be aham pashyami, right? If we use the pronoun, right, form instead of using the I as part of the verbal ending, right? So pashyami, right? So, and where the king lives is the second clause. The second clause in this. So these two clauses, right? The sentence contains a subordinate or a subordinate, which is usually what we call relative clause, a subordinate clause. There's a primary clause and a subordinate clause, right? So the subordinate clause will not really stand by itself, but the primary clause will stand by itself. So I see stands by itself. If I just say where the king lives, what do you mean where the king lives? It doesn't really stand by itself. It needs something else to go with it, right? So that's why it's called relative, right? It's relative to the other one, or it's subordinate to the other one because the other one is the primary clause. So we have different clauses in a sentence. One of them is going to be the primary one that stands by itself, and the other ones relate to it. So that's why they're called relative and subordinate. So where the king lives, and an independent an independent or co-relative clause, I see. So I would call that a primary clause and a subordinate clause. He calls it a relative and co-relative. He calls co-relative as independent and relative. If you just remember, there's a primary clause and there's secondary clause or relative clause or subordinate clause, right? So whatever terminology you want to know, there's one clause which is primary and the other one is not primary and it relates to it, right? So it's called relative clause. That's all you have to know. So here's some examples, right? So here's the first example. I see, he calls it a correlative clause. I call it a primary clause. And where the king lives, he calls that a relative clause. It could also be called a subordinate clause, right? Or a secondary clause, let's say. So 3, in Sanskrit, relative clauses usually goes first and the correlative clause, of course, goes second, right? But up here we have this is an English sentence we're talking about here. We've got I see, that's the correlative clause or the primary clause. Where the king lives is a secondary, subordinate, or relative clause, right? So we've got first the primary and then the secondary, right? Okay, so down here he's saying first usually the secondary comes, the relative clause or subordinate clause comes first, and then from left to right, right? And then we get the correlative or what's called the primary clause. So the relative clause is introduced by a relative adverb, indeclinable. When we see indeclinable, we get very happy because we don't have to learn any endings for it. It's just a word that can be used, right? And so we're going to learn some indeclinables to use to start a relative clause or a subordinate clause. And the correlative or the primary clause by a correlative adverb, right? So for example, here's an example, right? Where the king lives, the relative adverb is going to be, the adverb that starts that is where, right? The adverb that starts, here's the full sentence. Where the king lives, there I see, right? Where there. It's not the same kind of where that we know, where are we? Where are we is an interrogative. It's not an adverb. This is an adverb. Where, there, here, there, near, far, that sort of thing, right? They relate to each other, right? So where the king lives, there I see. Where the king lives, there I see. Okay, so that's some sentence like that. The first clause is where the king lives. It starts with where. That's the adverb that it starts with. That's used in the beginning of the relative clause here. What do you call it? The subordinate clause. The primary clause, the correlative clause, starts with there. There I see. Okay, so let's see this in Sanskrit. All right. So following the general rule that he says up here is that first of all, the subordinate clause or the relative clause comes first, and second of all, the primary clause comes. So we have here, yatra nripo vasati, tatra aham pashyami, right? So yatra nripo vasati, if we're going to parse this and translate this, first of all, we should look at the main clause, right? Go right to the end. What do we always do when we translate Sanskrit? Go right to the end of the sentence and look at the verb right at the end. So we have pashyami. Pashyami means I see, right? I see, right? We also have the pronoun aham here. So we go I see is aham pashyami, enough. Tatra, yatra and tatra. So yatra means where, tatra means there, right? So tatra, and these are indeclinables. So tatra means there I see. That can stand by itself. That's the primary clause, or what he calls correlative clause. That I see, right? What was the translation up here? There I see, right? There I see. There I see. Or I see there, right? The first one is yatra nripo vasati. So yatra nripo vasati. Vasati means he dwells, right? Or he lives, right? And nripo is nripaha by Sandhi, right? It's nominative, so it's the king lives, right? The king lives, right? And yatra means where. So where the king lives, where the king lives. Yatra nripo vasati, where the king lives. Tatra aham pashyami, right? There I see, right? Okay. So now we have here, it explains the same thing in Sanskrit. This is yatra is the subordinate clause adverb, and tatra is the adverb that starts the primary clause, right? Either relative or correlative clauses, right? Okay. So now here are relative adverbs and their correlative partners, right? So now what does that mean? Usually the relative comes first and the correlative comes second, right? Or the secondary comes first and the primary comes second. The subordinate comes first and primary. It's actually good. The way he says it is good. I like the way he says it, relative and correlative, okay? But remember, the correlative is the primary and the relative is the subordinate or secondary. So down here, we'll see which one to use first and which one to use second, because somebody may say, well, okay, you've got yatra and tatra. Which one do you use first? You use yatra first and tatra second. So let's look down here, right? So we have some of these given to us. Remember, these are all indeclinable, so we do not have to add endings to them, either verbal or noun endings, right? We just use them as they are. Now we might have to do sandhi with the next word. That's another thing. So yataha, tataha. So yataha means when or since. Tataha means therefore. Since this, therefore that, right? Yatra, where, tatra, there. So that was the one, they're the ones that he used in the above sentence, the example, right? Where and there, right? Yata and tata, since such and such, tata, so such and such, or therefore that, right? Yada, tada, right? Bhagavad Gita, yada, hi dharmasya glaniva, right? So yada, when, right? When, and tada, then, right? So when this happens, then that happens, right? So yadi means if, and tada, yadi and tada. So yadi, if that happened, then tada, then that happened, right? Okay, so here's some examples. When he goes, then I remember. So yada gachati tada smarami. So going from the end here, we have smarami means I remember, right? Tada is then. So then I remember, right? It starts off with yada, if or sorry, not if, when he goes, then I remember. When he goes, then I remember, right? So when the teacher's there, the student doesn't remember, but as soon as the teacher leaves the classroom, or he remembers the answer, right? So when he goes, then I remember. It's no use to me because I can't remember when he's there, right? So when he goes, then I remember. So if I go, now we have one, if I go, so I go, if you go, I go, if you go. You might say, yeah, I go, if you go, right? So literally is, if you go, then I go, right? So yadi, if, tada, then, right? So yadi gachasi, tada gachami, right? Tada gachami means I go, right? That tada means then. Yadi gachasi means you go, right? So yadi, if you go, then I go, right? Now you obtain fruit where the forest is, literally becomes, right? So where the forest is, then you obtain fruit. Okay, so yatra vanam asti tatra palani labase, right? So remember labase. We have asti. Okay, so labase is to obtain. It's a middle ending, right? So it's labate, labase, labate, like that. Labase, right? So labase means you obtain palani. Palani is plural of fruit. You obtain fruit. Tatra, there. You obtain fruit there. What's the relative clause? That's the correlative clause at the end. The relative clause is yatra vanam asti. Asti is another verb like bhavati, to be, right? Asti is it's the primary endings, the parasmaipada endings, not the atmanepada endings. And it's asti, it's third person singular, present tense, right? He is, right? what in this case, vanam is neuter noun, so it's in the nominative case. So vanam. So the forest is, right? So yatra means where. So where the forest is, tatra, there, the fruit is obtained, right? Okay. So now, number 6, there is also a relative correlative pronoun, yad and tad. So we notice up, what do we notice something? Let's have a look back here. So do we notice that these all begin with Y and these all begin with T? So good rule of thumb, all of the ones that we've learned here like that, all these adverbs that begin the relative and correlative clauses, all the ones that begin the relative clauses begin with Y. They are yataha, yatra, yata, yada, yadi, right? And the ones that start the correlative or the primary clauses, right, begin with T. Tata, tataha, tatra, tata, tada, and tada, right? Okay. So here we have two, yad and tad. So guess which one is for use in the relative clause and the correlative clause. Obviously, the relative clause is going to use yad and the correlative clause is going to use tad, right? Because they also begin with ya and ta, right? So they are who or he, who and he, right? Who and he. So this construction would be used to translate this sentence. The man who goes is the king, right? So the relative clause who goes is in the middle, right? Because we could say the man is the king. The man who goes is the king adds another clause to it. So in this case, we have basically a small part in between, which is the relative clause, and the rest of the sentence, the correlative part of it, is on either side, actually. In English, let's see what it's like in Sanskrit. In Sanskrit, the relative clause contains the relative pronoun yad, and the correlative clause contains the correlative pronoun tad. Sometimes the correlative pronoun may be omitted. Okay, that's an important line to remember. Sometimes we might not see a correlative. Remember I told you, yada, yada, hidamasya, glani, bhavade. Do we have a tad in there? No. So sometimes the correlative is omitted, right? So the pronoun yad follows the declension of tad, right? And for that declension, right? Now these are not these pronouns, these are not indeclinables. They are declined. So they have endings, so we have to learn the endings, but we won't learn the endings right now. We're on page 174. When we get 3 more pages down, we'll learn those endings. So let's have a look at an example here. So that example he gave, who man goes, right? He is king. So whomever the man is that goes, he is king, right? Which is translated into nice English up here when he introduced it. The man who goes is king. That's how we translate it into English. But in Sanskrit, how do we say it? In Sanskrit, we say it, who man goes, literally. He is king. Yeah. Let's understand the literal way, right? So now we have the relative clause coming first, the correlative clause coming second, and we have 2 things. We have who and we have he as the relative pronoun and the correlative pronoun, which are given in here. So let's have a look at them. So the way they said that it's yad and tad, right? So here we have yo. So somehow yad becomes yo. Naro, gachati. So naro. So yo is yaha, probably going to be yaha is going to become yo because of sandhi in front of naro. Naro is naraha in front of gachati, right? So that's how we break the sandhi. Sa is probably saha, becomes the drops of visarga and becomes sa, right? And nripo is nripo sti is going to be nripaha asti, right? By breaking the sandhi. So we break all those sandhis and we get that sa nripo asti is the main clause or the correlative clause. So what does that mean? It means he, right? Asti is nripaha, the king. He is the king, right? What is the relative clause? The relative clause says yo, or who, right? Or whomsoever, right? naro, so it's yaha, naro, naraha, gachati. So the king, the man goes. Whoever the man goes, whoever is the man who goes, sa, he is the king, right? So both who, yo, and he, sa, refer back to the man who is called the antecedent. Okay, so you don't have to know that word. Antecedent simply means something that the pronoun is, both these pronouns, yo and sa here, or yaha and saha, right, which they would be without Sandhi, right, refer back to the person, the one person which is being talked about here, the one subject which is being talked about here, the man, or the king, actually. He says refer back to the man. No, the king. Well, the man, yeah, but he's the king, the man who's the king. All right. So, okay, so man or king, whatever, he refers back to the subject, antecedent. In English, the antecedent goes directly before the relative pronoun who. Okay, we don't care about what happens in English, we know English. So in Sanskrit, the antecedent usually follows the relative pronoun who, or the relative pronoun, the correlative pronoun he. The antecedent. Okay, so what is the word that in this sentence, yo naro gachati sa and riposti? The word that follows the relative pronoun, right, is naro or naraha, the man. The word that follows the correlative pronoun, or saha, is nripaha, right, the king, right? So in Sanskrit, we get, first of all, we get these adverbs that we just learned, beginning with ya or ta, right, for the relative and correlative clauses, or pronouns, yad and tad, right, being used in the relative and correlative clauses, right? And we use them first, and after the word that directly comes after them is the subject or the antecedent, right? Subject, just think of it as the subject, refers back to the subject of the sentence, right? Okay, so let's have a look at this next one. So, who man goes, he is king. Yo naro gachati san riposti, right? The antecedent or the subject here is naro in the relative clause. In the relative clause. Or who goes, that man is the king. Who goes, that man is the king. Yo gachati sa naro riposti. This is a different sentence, right? But it means similar thing, means a similar thing. So where's the antecedent here? Is naro is here, coming again after sa, which is a form of tad, right? Which means he. Okay. Right. All right. So now the relative and correlative pronouns take a gender and number of the antecedent. Okay, so it's very important to know what the antecedent is, what the subject of the sentence is, right? The subject of the sentence is because what we have to, not with the adverbs, because we don't have to decline them, they're indeclinable. But now with yad and tad, which are pronouns, right, for relative and correlative clauses, we have to know what they refer to, because what they refer to tells us how to decline them, what endings to add to them. So those things, those relative and correlative pronouns, yad and tad, right, take the gender and number of the antecedent of the subject there, right? The case of the antecedent depends on its role in each clause, right? So the antecedent might have a different case. It might not have nominative case, right? Let's see. Here's some examples, right? So, I see the man who is going, literally becomes, right? In Sanskrit, that is, which man is going, him I see, right? So, if we translate that, we get yo, naro, gachati, tam pashyami. So in the relative clause, we get after the relative pronoun, right? we get, after yo or yaha, we get naro. Naro is the antecedent. It has to agree, yo has to agree with that. Yeah? Tampashami. Okay, so who is going? That man I see. Yo gachati tam naram pashyami. So here we have the antecedent given the primary clause in the relative. Here it was in the relative clause. Here it's in the correlative clause. Right. Yo gachati tam naram pashyami. Right. Who is going? That man I see. So, okay. So again, tam here, right, and naram have the same ending. So the king sees the elephant on which I stand, literally becomes, right, on which I am, right? So on which elephant I stand, him the king sees, becomes, right, I say becomes this in literally. Yasmin gaje tishtami tam ripaha pashyati, right? So we have the first clause is the relative clause is yasmin, right? Which goes with gaje, right? Gaje is locative on the elephant or at the elephant, right? Locative, singular, right? So therefore yasmin is locative, singular. Yeah. Yasmin gaje tishtami tam ripaha pashyati. Right. So then if we say it another way, if we say, on which I stand, that elephant the king sees, if we say it like that, then we have yasmin's tishtami tam gajam ripaha pashyati. So because here the antecedent is gajam, the elephant, and it's in accusative case here. So tam tad becomes tam, right? Tam gajam ripaha pashyati. Yeah. So now notice that the relative pronoun yad and the correlative pronoun tad agree with each other in number and gender, in gender and number, but may differ in case. Okay, so they're the same number, right? Either singular, dual, or plural. They're the same gender, masculine, feminine, or neuter, but they may not be the same case because of where they sit in the sentence. Like the antecedent, the relative word and the correlative word take a case, vibhakti, right? A nominal case ending. That is determined by their role in each clause, in the particular clause they're in. Study the following examples. Okay, so here's an example. I see the man with whom Rama goes. In Sanskrit, we would say, with which man Rama goes, him I see. So let's see what that is in Sanskrit. Yena narena saha ramo gachati tamaham pashyami. So narena here is the antecedent, right? It's in the instrumental singular. So yad is also in the instrumental singular. Yena, not yad, not yaha, but yena. Yena narena saha ramo. Ramaha here is in the nominative, right? And saha with Rama. Sam, it's with Rama, he goes, right? Tam aham pashyami, right? Or with Rama, with whom Rama goes, that man I see. So here we have Yena Ramo gachati tam naram aham pashyami. Okay, in this case, in the correlative clause, naram is the antecedent, is the main subject, and it's in the accusative case, and tam naram, right? Aham pashyami, I see What do I see? I see that man. I see that man, right? And yena has to, yena ramo gachti. I'm not sure about that. Yena. Okay. All right. Well, we'll just take his word for it like that. So Rama lives in the village from which I'm coming. So that we would say in Sanskrit is from which village I'm coming. In it, Rama lives. Right. So Yasmad, Gramad, right? So this is ablative from which village, right? Right. Agachami, I come, right? Tasmin, right? That Tasmin, Ramo, Vasati. The antecedent here is Gramad. So Yasmad goes with Gramad, right? So now we have from which I am coming, in that village, Rama lives. From which I am coming, in that village, Rama lives. Yasmad agachami, tasmin grame, right? Ramo vasati. So grame here is the main subject here and the antecedent, right? So tasmin is in the grame is locative singular. And so tasmin is also locative singular. Tasmin tayo sheshu, yeah, right? So therefore, tasmin grame, ramo vasati, right? So it takes from here, and yasmad is the other one. That has to agree in gender and number, but not in case. Okay. So the pronoun yad follows the same declension as tad, masculine, neuter, feminine, right? So whatever way it's declined, and whatever gender it's declined, right? Except that the masculine nominative singular follows normal Sandhi rules and therefore appears as yaha or yo when it's followed by a short, by a soft consonant, right? Etc. Observe, for example, the masculine, right? So here we have yad, right? So we have yaha yao ye, yam yao yan, yena yabyam yahi, yasmai yabyam yebyaha, yasmat yabyam yebyaha, yasya yayo yeshu, yasmin yayo yeshu, right? In the different cases. Okay, so he's given it here yad, and tad will be the same. So what would tad be? Tad would be taha tau te, tam tau tan, tena tabim tahi, tasmai tabim tebiha, tasmat tabim tebiha, tasya tayoho tesham, tasmin tayo teshu. Okay, so I would write them both out like that, and obviously we have to learn them by use. We'll learn them by use. Okay, so now we're going to look at the vocabulary. So we'll just quickly go through the vocabulary and we'll be finished for today. Dharmiki, right? Long I ending, feminine adjective, virtuous. Nadi, which was our paradigm for long I ending feminine nouns, otherwise known as ikaranta, strilinga for feminine, right? Nadi shabdaha, that's how you would say it. And then you learn how to decline it. Right? So nadi, feminine, river, patni, feminine for wife, mitram, it's neuter, right? We're used to patram, mitram, we're used to the M endings, of neuter endings. Friend, yad, which is a pronoun, which means who, what, or which. Vapi, feminine, meaning pond. Sundari, feminine adjective, meaning beautiful. So here we have Sanskrit, English, and Sanskrit, English. So relative and correlative adverbs. So we have yataha, since or when, tataha, therefore. Yatra, where, tatra, there. Yata, since or as. Tata, so therefore. Yada, when, right? Tada, then. Yadi, if. Tada, then. And don't forget that sometimes the correlative will be missing. Okay, so sometimes we'll just see the relative, the one that's in the relative clause.
Om Namo Narayanaaya. Om Namo Narayanaaya.